Hello, everyone. This is the June 21st meeting of the Westford Budget Task Force. Welcome. The first thing on our agenda is to review the minutes. Thank you, Jeremy, for taking notes, and thank you for taking notes again today. I thought the minutes looked great. Did anyone have any comments in the minutes?
We did have a suggested change from Erica, which is up on the screen.
Okay.
It's just trying to capture the fact that we were talking about two separate sets of benchmark towns.
Okay.
It didn't really reflect that.
Okay, good. Thanks. This looks clear. If there aren't any other comments, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Let's go and raise hands.
Do you
Okay.
want to do a roll call just because we're remote, or is hands okay?
It's okay with me, but you're right. By the book, we should be doing, and I think this is the only thing we're actually going to vote on, maybe. So let me.
Everyone, if you see everyone, is it required by law or?
It is.
I think
yeah.
if you're remote, then yes, by the book, you're supposed to do roll call. So I will do that. Dan.
Yes.
Erica.
Yep.
Kristen.
Yes.
Christina.
Yes.
Valerie.
Aye.
Amy.
Abstain.
Let's see, Shanna.
Yep.
Thank you. And Jenny
Yes.
and Dr. Chu.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. Okay, thanks for that. So today's exciting because we're gonna get into the work. Just to stick with the agenda, I think the conclusion we had last time, but I can just see if there's any comments or concerns from folks. Hi, Vibha, welcome. The comparable communities, I think we're going to use what's called the DART plus for the schools. I think we had consensus on that. I think we should also go ahead and get started with the comparable lists, the municipal comparable lists that we've been using. I think one of the things we'll ask the benchmark team to do is take a look at those communities across a couple factors, so that we may choose to make some changes, but if we don't, at least we'll have some clear sort of background about why that's a good set of towns to choose for the public. So, but I think for now let's move forward, because unless the benchmarking team identifies some aberration or concern, I think it makes a lot of sense to stay with that list. We don't have any additional changes to the outline. We're still using the principal outline that Erica provided some edits to. We may refer to that today, but I don't think we have any changes for that. I think the principal thing for us to discuss is how we want to do the breakout groups and who's in which group. And as you know, I sent a suggestion, which I'm just going to pull up so it's in front of me. Okay, so my proposal, I'm just going to read my proposal out loud, because in case anyone watching this later doesn't have access to my email. First of all, thanks, Christina, for a good suggestion. Christina suggested that we maybe have a smaller number of subcommittees with more people on them. I think that may be a good way to work collaboratively. So I think breaking into two groups makes a lot of sense. And it seemed like the ones that fit together most were sort of the benchmarking and efficiency potential. The team that's doing the benchmarking and comparison between communities are going to be in the perfect position to spot differences in spending that might make a good place initially to look for an efficiency gain. And the people who had one of those two as their first choice were included Amy, Jenny, Bibu, Kristen, Christina, and Valerie. And then the other was the budget challenge category and the new revenue. And I think it makes a lot of sense to have the people who put those first were Erica, Dan, Shanna, and me. And I think Dr. Chu, I think we would ask you to join that one as well. So we've got another school person there. So that roughly splits us in half in terms of numbers, and I think splits apart the main tasks. Let me just ask if anyone has any concerns about that or changes in suggested approach, or people feel okay rolling forward with that. Okay, looks like we're in agreement. So I think what we can do for the balance of the meeting, this may be a little bit strange, but I think we may have kind of a working group meeting for each of the two groups with all of us present. I think next time what we'll do is we'll probably meet separately. So let's talk through the first some of the issues surrounding the first group. Erica?
I just noted on the agenda, it did say talking about the schedule a little bit. And just,
you're right.
yeah, and about half an hour ago, just thinking, just because I'm thinking about it, I jotted down some ideas about approach on the schedule, just because I think it would be good for us to have some deadlines, and I don't know if I'm able to share the screen or I should.
I think Dan can grant you that privilege if you don't already have it.
This media co-host, Erica.
Okay.
See if that works.
Share screen, yes. Okay. All right. Can you see what I was working on?
We can see in an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, so this is really just getting started, but I mean, the idea is to try to specifically say what we're going to do, because I think it would be good for us all to have in our head what it is that the different tasks are going to be. And specifically, I was thinking about the analysis because I love analyses. And so here I'm talking about, going through and exploring some of the high, low, and median costs for each risk, as well as for each potential revenue source, and doing kind of Monte Carlo situations and analyses like that. So the point is really that I think any of these are going to take time. Some of them are dependent on each other. So for instance, if we're looking at the market basket of communities, we may see discrepancies between our budgets and other towns that we have to delve into. Obviously, that's in the first subgroup of us that are doing that, but the outcome of that might inform some of our outreach, because then we have to talk to department heads. So just having a schedule that kind of links some of those dependencies, I thought might be a good idea, as well as, after this, I was thinking we need to have some dates where we have to pull things together. Probably towards the end of August, if we're going to start, well, maybe, or mid-September, because if we're going to pitch our answers, we want to make sure that we have everything together by the right time. So I'm really just worried about time, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I thought this was a start at it, and I'm happy to put more flesh on the bones if people want me to. Otherwise, I'm happy to not do that. But if it looks like something that's worth doing, then I'm offering to do a little bit more of that for our next session, so that we can make sure that we have like deadlines that we're all marching towards.
Yeah, I think that would be great, Erica. And actually, if you don't mind, maybe you can keep this live today. And as we talk about different deliverables, you could add them in.
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Because I think that's what we'll probably spend the rest of the hour, is sort of going through, okay, what exactly does this mean? What do we already have in hand? What do we think we're going to need to look for? And hopefully exit with a little bit of a work plan, so that when the subcommittees meet, they're kind of already up and running. So
you know what? I don't know. So I'm not at home right now, and I don't know that I know how to do that on this computer. So I might. And I looked all over for a pen and paper, and I don't have one.
okay.
I might not be able to do it live, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But if people are taking good notes, please share them so I can make sure I get everything.
Erica, are you able to email the file to Dan and I, and perhaps we could do it and take some notes and add to it?
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely.
That is a great solution. So I put a couple of things in my email that might be good starting points for work plans for the group. So we have some examples already around of some of the first kind of cut at what some of the benchmarking might look like from both the municipal set that Dan sent and also the school set that Jenny sent. I guess on the municipal side, Dan, how much of an apples to oranges problem do we have between the different budget categories of towns? I know we've, somewhere in the email, people were concerned that there might be a lot of kind of unpacking and, slicing and dicing to get to an apples to apples look. Does the state regulate sort of what's in which category to the extent that we might be at apples to apples?
They do, but as Christy and I were actually talking about this through email about the Schedule A, one thing that isn't consistent across the board is health insurance, which is clearly evident with Westford because we have the latest FY 22 data, and that's when we switched to a partially self-funded plan. So half, or basically 3/4 of our information is in the health insurance bucket with all the other unclassified information. The other part is under other financing sources. So that'd be a little bit tough to unpack from each community for trying to compare apples to apples on benefits. And then, the other thing that was pointed out was with like public safety, with dispatchers, we have a separate department for that. So it's labeled under other public safety departments. Well, some police departments have their own dispatchers budgeted within, same with fire departments and whatnot. So, and some have a regional department. So there are those factors across the board that we have to kind of look at and see how we want to package those together.
So, Christina?
Yeah, I'll just chime in because Dan and I were discussing this. I actually started kind of diving into, at least on the town list, all of the budgets to try to figure out sort of the actual dollar figures that each of them were spending on a select set of areas. And it really was across the board how they divided things out. I didn't exactly go back to, I think it's the DOR, that the other spreadsheet, to see how the numbers compared, because I just saw things being categorized and put into different departments kind of all over the place. So I really felt like you had to kind of go into the budgets and pull things out. So I wasn't able to actually do their entire budget, but I picked sort of top categories, police, fire, dispatch, library, council on aging. I think I did health department. I started to do health insurance. That was a little tricky to figure out exactly what they were doing. There may have been a couple of others. But I didn't even touch the schools because it was just too big to look at.
Well, let me just ask a question quick. Bibi, I'll get to you in just one sec. I just want to ask a question before I forget. So my ancient memory of being in the school committee is that the DESI did actually force an apples to apples comparison, and it was pretty carefully done, and all the different schools had to basically recategorize things into the DESI buckets, so there was a straight comparison. I think, Jenny, you put sort of a high level comparison example into our shared drive, but isn't there a very, very detailed line item by line item almost DESI comparison tool?
I'm not aware of anything like a line by line comparison. So Dr. Chu, are you aware of anything?
What Tom's talking about is just all of the state function codes that we've identified everything through. DESI is comparing our operating budgets. DESI isn't going to go into all of the different functions of each line item as to what we're spending on for example, for our teachers versus administration or things like that. We can keep looking at that aspect of it, but the data that we get from DESI for the DART Plus information is actually quite extensive already in terms of what what is being spent and how those are being compared, but not necessarily down to the actual function code within each operational budget.
But just to use your example, you would be able to get resolution on how much is teacher salary, how much is administration cost, et cetera.
Well, we have that, not even necessarily through DESI, like we know what the teacher salaries are, and yes, you're right, administrative costs, just based on the data that we've already pulled with the DART and adjacent market basket already. I mean, we have all of that, and we can share all of that in time as we're going through this process.
Okay, so in terms of creating the wheel, there basically already is a very thorough benchmark available for all the costs that we can look at and compare.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Okay, let me, I'm trying to recall which school folks are on which pieces of the team. So Jenny, you're in the benchmarking efficiency group already. So maybe one thing you could do for our next meeting would be just to pull kind of whatever the current state of the art is in terms of what analysis we have. So we can see if we need to augment it or change it, or if it's just great the way it is in terms of us, getting some clues about where to look. Vibhu?
Yep, thanks, Tom. So I just looked into some databases for all the schools in the state. Was able to put it in Tableau. One challenge which I have seen, and I think school committee members can help there, is all the information is not there up to date. Like there is a lot of information till 2021, even for Westford. When I look into what is on the town site and what is on the database, there is a lot of difference. So what is that single source of truth when we are going to look into this market baskets, which we are going to follow? If we get that information, I do have a lot of tools which I can start using to quickly come up with these discrepancies and work on that very fast. But my challenge was, what data source is the right source?
Tom, if I can jump in there, that's true.
Yeah, please.
All of the DESI information is not even the most recent fiscal year. It's going to be the previous fiscal year. Just in the way in which they are collecting all the information, and then it's impacted by the governors. But I mean, everything that we're dealing with, and before we even figure out the reimbursements and things that we get based on all of the final budgets from the state. But what it'll give us is a trend. So it'll give us trends over time. But you're right, it's not going to be current fiscal. It's going to be at least a year past, if not, depending on what time we look at it. So we're looking at it. We're looking at all of the DESI information in terms of trends over time. In addition, when we look at all of our comp information for salaries and things like that, we're also having to look to see which of these towns have a settled contract, who is going out to, who's in the middle of negotiating the contract. And so we're trying to keep track of all of that information too. But you're right, the DESI information is not up to date with us, so we have to look at the trend.
Yes, like on the per pupil expenditure, I already uploaded to the share drive. It was fiscal year 21's data. That was the latest data we can gather from DESI website, but just there's no new data available from DESI.
Right. So I guess we have a decision about whether we consider, I mean, the straightforward thing to do and the standardized data thing to do would be to use the DESI data. My own opinion is that will give us the information that we're looking for, because I don't think there's a lot of a radical year-to-year shifts typically that go on. So I think if the purpose is to look for where we're investing more, investing less relative to peers, I think we'll get the information that we're looking for. But we can take a look at it next time and see how we feel once we're all looking at it.
And we can
Uh,
keep updating it too, Tom, because as we close out FY23, that's when they will start looking to, then they'll start preparing the FY22 data. So while we're in this process, if it gets updated, we can certainly add that as well.
Thanks. Amy?
Sure, I apologize. I missed some meetings, and but I just had a question about the schools. I know we're talking a lot about the budgets, a lot about what they look like. Do any of these, have we talked about if these, our system is very different. Yes, we have K through 2, 3 through 5. We have a lot of different separate schools, which then in turn causes more expenses, right? So it makes it really challenging to compare budgets if we're not like these others. Are the other towns like us in those regards where we have a lot of separate schools?
It depends on the size of the town. So I would say most of them have a similar number of schools, whether they're K to 2, then 3 to 5, or whether there's the same number of elementary schools that are all all K to 5. I would say that is one of the pieces, because they look at our enrollment. So they're looking at the number of kids that they have there. It is possible that some of the districts could just have a larger school with more kids in one school, but I mean,
that's going to play into it, and I think that's an important piece to just note when we compare ourselves to them.
It would, and I think that's where we'll see if more money is spent on administration in one district versus another, because that's really where you're not going to see you're not going to see a huge savings in terms of whether they have a larger school with more students in it. If we have smaller schools, because the lion's share of the cost is still going to be on the classroom instruction. But it's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we should keep a running kind of FAQ style list of questions that come up, because I think lots of people in the public are going to have those questions too. So thank you for that. I guess, Christina, since you've already started taking a crack, so on the school side, we'll take a look at what Desi has and we'll ask questions about whether that's good enough or not good enough. On the town side, it sounds like we don't have the, it's not so easy because of these problems. I guess, Christina, would it make sense, since you've already taken a running start at this, or maybe you want to pair up with someone else on that subcommittee, kind of to take a first crack at it and then highlight all the questions that fall out of that? Like, how we do we want to modify or move things around on our side to try to get apples to apples? Or are we going to pick certain categories that we think are important to focus on, just do those?
Yeah, I was having some internet issues, so I think I missed the very beginning of your statement there, Tom. But are you asking for just for the town side departments, or okay?
Yeah, so I think we have a good way to do the school, so we can.
Yep.
There'll be interesting things to do for, what percentage of total spending is going to schools versus town, and that's a piece of analysis that we'll do. But I think from the municipal budget analysis side, I think that we'll kind of leave the schools as sort of, they'll be in there because we're doing the budget analysis, but I don't think we'll try to dissect it down further than just the aggregate school number. So my question to you, I guess, Christina, was, it seems like the way for us to highlight all the questions and decisions we need to make benchmarking wise with the kind of apples to oranges problems between towns would be to sort of take a crack at it to begin with and see what problems highlight themselves.
Yeah.
You already started doing that, basically.
Yep, I have kind of started doing that. So yeah, I would love to dive into that. I would like to pair up with somebody just to bounce some ideas off of, because it's going through each of these budgets and trying to pull these different categories out. My eyes are going a little crossways, so it'd be nice to have somebody else to just sort of, have as a sanity check. But there are a few things that have already kind of stood out to me, but obviously need to look at them a little bit more to see what exactly is going on there. If it's just a difference in accounting, or whether there's a real difference in, like, I've also been looking at the number of FTEs in each of those departments, just to kind of give a check that way too.
Great, and I can see why it'd be valuable to pair up with somebody. I don't know if anybody feels sort of on that subcommittee feels sort of naturally inclined to jump in. I don't know
I'm
if
happy to help Christina on that. And we can also reach out to our department heads who might have counterparts in those communities that know more as well. So I think that dovetails nicely into kind of the department interviews and assessing the department needs.
Yeah, that,
so
that would,
thanks for.
no, I'm sorry,
Christina.
that was. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, Kristen, it would be great if you did, because you'll have access to all the information, and that'd be a great link. You also brought up the survey of the departments. I think that was an idea you'd had, Kristen, at some earlier meeting, and I think it's a great one. Another piece of work for that subcommittee would be to draft what the questionnaire is, basically. What exactly do we want to ask of them? And part of it could be free form, but there probably needs to be a little bit of thought into that. So we'll leave that out there as a potential task. I don't know if anyone wants to in that group wants to jump on that. The other thing that I thought might be interesting, but it's a significant amount of work, would be to pick a subset of the towns that we've probably selected, probably with Kristen's help, that we think might have some insights to share, and then actually do some sort of interviews or some sort of discussion with them. I think it would be useful to say we highlighted 6 towns that we thought were particularly forward thinking, and we talked to the town manager and their budget director and asked them, what over the past 5 years had given them the biggest efficiency gains or opportunities they've seen. I don't know how folks feel about that, if that sounds like something that the public would expect or that we benefit from. That's another kind of potential action item for that committee.
I think that could help and clarify things too.
Okay. Jumping around a little bit, but do you think that we could ask the subcommittees each to try to find a time to meet separately between now and the next time we meet as a group? Just because I think if we have the action, it's a little bit unwieldy right now to assign people to each of these tasks, but I think we find that the task list is sort of assembling itself. Might be useful for the subcommittees to meet and hash out who's going to jump on what.
They still have 48-hour notice publishing the time, right? So if we're meeting next week, we just make sure that there's 2 48-hour notices that have to happen.
Right. And we also can decide whether we think it's productive or important for us to have a large group meeting next week, or if we want to use that time for the subcommittees. So we'll come back to the end and talk about that. So, okay, so I think we've got, for the benchmark efficiency team, I think a couple items here we've identified. One is to take a run through the data that we have and highlight questions around, are we comparing in the right way, or do we have an apple and orange problem? We've talked about putting together a questionnaire for our own internal town departments. We talked about identifying, say, 5 or 6 peer communities that we think we could really learn something from, and scheduling some sort of kind of interview discussion. And for the schools, we said we'll go ahead and basically take a look at what the DESI can provide in terms of resolution and decide whether we think that's good enough for our purposes for analysis, or whether we think we need to do something else. Jenna?
I was just thinking that if we did interviews with other towns, we were talking about that for mostly the budget efficiencies, but I think it might be helpful for somebody from the other subcommittee to sit in so that we could talk about, are they doing anything like innovative for new revenue sources too, as part of it. I think that if we're making that an effort to maybe sit down with some other leaders, that we should be including that part of it too, to see if there are other towns that have, right now we kind of have like what the Hingham plan was, but what are other towns doing? That might be helpful too.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So, so point taken, we should be thoughtful about using other people's time and make sure that we're everything that we're interested in, we think we can learn from, we're presenting at once. Christina?
Just a slight comment on Shayna's idea. I think that's a great idea. And trying to balance other people's time, I think is also a good idea. However, we may find that we want to talk to different towns about efficiencies versus revenue. Just from the budgets that I've been looking at, some may have better ideas on the efficiency side versus the revenue side. So we might just want to keep that in mind.
And sorry, not to but maybe it's about coming up with like list of questions. And so maybe it's not 3 of us all attending with certain towns, but dividing and conquering and kind of adding in those questions each place. And, you know, maybe there's one town that you feel like efficiencies are the highest, but then it's not a conversation, you have a task item to just say, hey, you doing anything with new revenue that's helpful? You know, that just, it's kind of like an add-on. And then maybe someone else is doing a different meeting, you know, like if we can divide and conquer that way, that might be the most efficient than trying to pool like 3 people all together and then being able to report back to each.
Yeah, when we've done things like this, when I've done things like this in the past, scheduling becomes a problem. So usually what will happen is, or what has happened in the past is you develop a question list just like you described. And then sometimes individuals will take ownership of like the interview. So like if there's 5 people to interview and there's 3 people on the subcommittee, you know, you kind of split them up. There's some upsides and downsides of that. I mean, it's nice to have more than one set of ears listening, but sometimes just making contact and getting the scheduling to work is challenging enough that you have to break it apart that way. Amy, did I see your hand, or are you all set?
I was just going to recommend adding that to the task list to create a questionnaire. That's all I was going to.
Okay, great. Yeah, each subgroup probably needs to put together a questionnaire and also identify the towns that they're most excited to talk to, and we'll see if they don't have to be the same, but there may be some overlap. So moving to the other group, a couple things that suggest themselves as action items on the budget challenges, new revenue side. One is just to clearly articulate what the budget challenges are. We have that list in our outline, and that's I think a great list. But some of them you may have to just to make sure the public can understand them and make sure we're all understanding them the same way. There's sort of like a 1-paragraph write-up, might be longer for some, that sort of describes what it is in some detail and then provides some sort of scope. So as an example, I'll pick the waste one, which is a little bit tricky because I know we're in negotiations, but just describing why it's a budget challenge, the nature of the challenge. You know, in that case, our longtime low bidder is retiring, so we're going to have to move, and it's going to be a significant change for us because the new bidders are insisting on a slightly different method of collection, bin-based collection, which we haven't done before. So there's a lot to think about there and to describe. And then I think we can ballpark what we think the additional cost of moving to that area will be. So when someone's looking at it, they see, okay, what is the issue? You know, why is it challenging? And here's the approximate dollar or some range of dollar impact that we think might be, you know, beyond the historical spending rate. So let's see. I'm wondering if Dan, I know you're on that working group. I don't know if you, maybe you and I could do that together, or if you wanted to take a first crack.
Yeah, sounds good. I don't mind taking a first crack at all and then showing you what we have too. And with Chris or Jenny too, I might need your help with some of the school ones just to get some narrative going on those. But yeah, we could organize that.
Another logical piece for that work group would be the new revenue sources, or potential new revenue sources. And what Hingham did, which I think is at least a good first crack, is they did kind of a high, medium, low ranking. Like, here's something that could have a big impact. Here's something that maybe we should look at, but it's probably a pretty small dollar. And I think a good starting point might just be to start with their list and see, you know, if there's something we should add to it or something we should take off. But they do go through a pretty thorough list of, you know, what some towns in the Commonwealth are doing for these additional revenue sources. So a good first cut might be to start with that document and then kind of make a Westford version of it to come back to the team and say, okay, this, we've borrowed a lot of good ideas here, but what do we need to add because we're facing a different situation? Or Shannon?
Do we have any way of knowing any other towns that have done something similar to that, Higgum? So we have other points of reference, or like, how would I go about Googling, like, to keep it within Massachusetts, within something that's relevant? Because that's been on my mind too, about finding something else.
There definitely are, and might be a useful ad, both for the public and for us to kind of pull a bunch of them together, just so we're all not wandering around the internet finding them. In some earlier meeting, or it might have been a pre-meeting for this, I think we had 5 or 6 actually that we identified. Is that ringing a bell with anybody, or am I making that up?
Yeah, it was a pre-meeting. So Dan's team did a whole inventory of towns that have done either overrides or other revenue raising or expenditure cuts. So we have quite a bit of information. Dan, I'm not sure that if that lives on the shared drive or if we were still vetting that before it went out.
No, that's in the shared drive. So it's a folder. It's called Override Info from Other Communities. And so we must be 25 at least there. We identified some that did a really good job. I actually have a document in there, a Word doc, that kind of gives a 1 or 2 sentence overview of each of those folders, the communities, on which ones I think we should be looking at. Like Arlington did a great job, Brookline did, of course Hingham, Shrewsbury is a good one to look at. So we have a ton of information already in their shared drive, so I don't think we have to go looking too much further at this
I'll
point.
go back, and I don't remember seeing it. I went through it all, but maybe I missed it.
Okay.
I'll
You
go back and
contact
look.
me off. If you can't find it, let me know. I'll help you.
Yeah, there's a lot. So I'll try to walk through it all, and I'll probably take it in bites, 30 minutes at a time over the course of 10 days or something. So thank you for putting that together, Dan, and that's a great resource. I don't know if anyone wants to sign up to, you don't have to start with the Hingham list if you find something that you like better somewhere else, but borrowing some good ideas, kind of making a Westford draft. I don't know if that appeals to anybody. Okay, can leave that out there for now.
Yeah, I can start working on that.
Okay, that'll be great. And maybe we can team up with somebody too, just to share the work. Yeah, Erica?
Yeah, the thing that I had hoped to start looking at was, and maybe it would happen later after Dan has created the narratives, but on the risk, on the challenges list, what I would think would be valuable, as well as on the revenue side as well, but having a range, right? So a high, low, and likely range of impacts that we can then use later on if we run either an algorithm or a Monte Carlo in order to figure out what our gap is. So that's what I was kind of hoping to work on.
Okay. Yeah, I think there probably will be a range for each. I mean, without seeing the future, it just seems logical that we're not going to have enough resolution or precision to pick a number.
Yeah, for some of these, they're going to be contracts, so we're going to have set figures, but other pieces of their variable that will have, a range associated with it. So we can identify which are which when we move forward.
Okay, so Erica, I think it probably does make sense for Dan to make a first pass, and then you could take a look at what he's done and see if we need to, upgrade or modify the format somehow to make sure we can support the analysis that you're thinking about. Okay, so Shanna, thank you for taking a first crack at that, and I'd be happy to help if you reach a point that you just want another set of eyes to look at it. And then we talked about kind of an interview set. Again, I think we'll want to pick a subset of towns that we think have been particularly creative, and there may just be things that we want to understand. Like, just as an example, there are towns, I think, that have implemented a real estate transfer tax, basically, where I guess it's the buyer that pays an additional % fee on a real estate transaction.
I was looking at interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to a town that's doing that and just understand what problems they ran into, because I'm not sure it sounds like a great idea for us, but the
It's usually communities that are more second home buyers, like Nantucket has it. I think some Cape Cod communities have it. So it's really aimed at those destination type municipalities who have that influx.
yeah, and in some cases we'll need help when we're taking a look at these from the schools, because I know the schools have done a lot of study of school fees and school transportation fees and other things. But that's something that shows up on the revenue potential list is, yeah, basically fees that would apply to schools. Pay as you throw is actually getting a pay as you throw. If you're not familiar with this, is it's sort of the idea that Westford would, for example, you would have a bin when the new waste contract comes out. Kristen tells me that the only people bidding on it are requiring that we have a bin-based system, because then they can do automated collection. And so everyone will have a bin. And the way many communities make this work is the bin is a certain size. And if you have more trash than will fit in the bin, you have to buy bags. And that's called pay as you throw. So it means that past some amount, you end up paying by the bag for additional waste that you're putting into the system. The Recycling Commission in parallel is doing their own sort of community education study of this. And so we'll be able to team up with them to get insights from them about what other communities are doing and why they're doing it and how the different programs are set up. And so there'll be some additional help there. So I think we also agreed that we'd have an interview list. So that subcommittee will need to identify, or it'd be great if they'd identify some number of communities they'd like to go talk to. You know, either because they've implemented something we're curious about and would like to understand how it works, or if we think they're particularly good at it. And I'm sure, you know, Kristen can help us, you know, pick towns that she finds particularly impressive in that regard. So I guess, does that feel like a kind of a working outline for each of the two subcommittees to chew on for a bit? We'll send some sort of notes around. It'll be in the minutes too, but we'll send some sort of summary around. I guess we'll probably build on Erica's tool and add these more specific deliverables with tentative deadlines and make sure that that's available to everybody. Regarding public engagement, I think fairly soon we'll have the sort of virtual suggestion box on the task force web page. So that'll be one way we can begin to collect questions from the public. We will have, I think we're gonna have a format or some sort of forum. Yep, Valerie?
Is there any help needed on that, the suggestion box? I'm happy to use my Google Form skills.
I'm not sure who's handling that. Is that Dan? Are you handling that?
Yeah, so I spoke with Mike Wells past couple of days, and he thought the easiest thing to do was just to have an email link, and that's what we saw a lot of other towns do as well. So it is on the website right now, just as so we could share with you today and get your input on it. But I don't know if we want to talk about that right now or.
Sure.
All right, let me share this. Actually, I can't share it right now. Let me see here. Oh, Erica, I think I made you the host. Can you make me a co-host?
Oh,
Click on
dear.
me. Sorry about that. Clicked the wrong button.
You gave away your power.
Erica's,
I gave it
that's
all
right.
away.
Okay.
Erica.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I think we have to talk about where to put this on the screen so it's a little more accessible too. But basically, this is our website. We have the list of members, our mission, and right below it, it has, if you have any questions or input, please let us know. So you click on the link. Right now, it's just saying email to me, but I wanted to talk to you all about if this should be going to everybody in the group, just as a BCC, so we can't reply all. And then if we're using emails, how to go forward and storing these. Do we just save them to the shared drive and we can take them as they come in, or is there a better way to do this?
If I can jump in, I do really think a Google form is a better way to do it, because the email, even if it went to all of us, or if it's just going to you, it's not necessarily letting somebody know that it's gone anywhere. And honestly, even the website links that we have that create forms that come to us, I know on the school side, I find it unbelievably clunky. Whereas the Google form, if we set it up as a Google form, it'll have an automated response that'll go to them, thanking them for their suggestion. And we could even say it will be brought to the task force's attention. We could say whatever we want. And then all of those comments will feed into a Google sheet that then we could all review periodically. It could be in our drive. We could be looking at that. I just think that ultimately, if Valerie is able to kind of really, or I could do it as well too, create just a quick Google form, that would be the link right there that it says, please let us know. They click on that link in the same spot, and then it just goes to a Google form instead of an email.
Great.
Thanks. Erica?
I think Chris makes a great point, and I like the reasoning there. And I would suggest that if we're making a Google form, that perhaps we can, tickle their imagination, just with a list of categories to say, are you, providing a suggested efficiency, or, or concern about our approach, or, whatever it is, but just so that they can think about the type of things that they might include in their suggestion.
Yeah, I think the idea of having prompt questions, or at least the ability to have prompt questions, is a really good one. Valerie?
I was just going to add that I think people sometimes, I know at least I do, freeze up with a sort of a blank email.
Yeah.
So I love that idea. And again, happy to help.
Okay, well, Valerie, would you mind linking up with Dan and whatever support we need to provide to make that happen? So that's great. So just in terms of overall timing, I think maybe the subcommittees can look at these action items we've highlighted so far, maybe add to them and suggest some, what reasonable deadlines might be. Just in the idea of managing to this overall schedule, I was thinking it would be good if we'd done all of our primary analysis and sort of all the action items that we've talked about so far over the course of maybe the next month. So I think there'll be plenty to do after that as well. But I don't know how people feel about that, and maybe people need to get their hands on the data and get into the problem a little bit before we can really decide that. But just overall, I think we'd be better served by really digging in and sprinting now, and then having more time for kind of communication and refinement. So so maybe just people, when they're looking at deadlines, can just kind of think in those terms, and when we get back together again, we can see if that's reasonable or not. Christina, did you have a question?
I was just going to add that I think as a first push, that's probably reasonable, or at least to attempt to do a month.
Okay.
I was just going to add, Tom, that I feel like you're right. Let's work towards that deadline. Then as we're looking at, if we feel like we need additional time, that's much better than thinking we have longer than we have.
Yeah, and I think some of it may be hard to do, but may not get all the interviews done, for example. But if in a week we've identified some interview questions, or a couple of weeks in the towns we want to go after, we can schedule as best available. So there may be some things still hanging out, but it'd be good if we had sort of a cohesive view. I also think it'd be useful for us to get together with the public and share sort of a working draft before it's finalized. So present it as a working draft. Say, this is what we have so far, this is what's outstanding, and use that opportunity to see what kind of questions come up, and if people feel like that's well served. So also maybe thinking about trying to do some sort of public forum, roughly in a month or 6-week time frame, say. Just an idea. Okay.
Tom, that also brings up a question. We had a department head meeting this morning and we were talking about the strategic planning retreat. And someone had brought up, well, does the budget task force want to present at that strategic planning retreat? And they said, we were having a meeting today. We had already talked about, perhaps having an information gathering session with the public for the budget task force, and then kind of checking our work with them at a point in time. And then do we supplement that with something at the strategic planning retreat? I know the select board is going to be looking at the topics again on Tuesday, but just wanted to bring that up with the group and get your thoughts. I've certainly not participated in one before, but will be, and don't know if that's the right venue to have our group at.
Good. Thanks for bringing that up. Erica?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. When we first started having those retreats, I remember more in the earlier days than the later ones, we would have small group conversations where they would try to extract perspectives from the public, where we could give opinions and concerns. That might be like perfect timing to kind of run by with them what we found, coming from a place of knowledge, having done a lot of the analysis up to that point. And then seeing if we're going to get a lot of pushback or not, or at least socializing with them if we think we're going to have to make some difficult choices somewhere. So I'm a huge fan of that idea, and I'm particularly thinking that it would be good to have some of those small group conversations that we used to have at the retreats.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So the retreat is September 16th or something.
7th, I think.
7th.
Okay. So we would probably have the first working public forum I was talking about sort of, I guess, mid-July, late in July, and just be focused on that and take 2 hours and, try to get as much input as we possibly can, going through it in a lot of detail. The strategic retreat, I think the presentations are usually like 20 minutes or something. So it would be a higher level view. And then if we have smaller group breakouts, we could get into more detail. But I think, the whole point in doing this is to make sure the public understands the challenge and understands the range of trade-offs that, are going to be part of this. So it'd be terrific to include it. Okay, we have a few minutes left. So just in terms of work, does it make sense to continue having this larger group meeting, or do you think we'd be better served to take next week and have, sort of subcommittee working sessions? We could do both. Erica?
I know it sounded like I might not have wanted us to continue the weekly just because I was expressing the 48-hour, but really I think it might be nice to still have it next week. In particular, if I'm going to try to do, a plan, then or maybe Tom, you and I can just get together, but I think that having someone to bounce that off of would be helpful, but also then having it in front of the group to say, oh, well, that's all wet, or see if we're, once we put the flesh on the bones, is a month the right time frame to get our initial data gathering done. For that reason, I think that meeting next week would be helpful. Any
other perspectives?
Would it be possible? I'm all for this meeting next week too. I was going to be okay if we used the time next week to have our subgroup meetings as well, only because I already have that sort of, geared in the schedule. I don't know if we could piggyback them, maybe, adjust the time and do both. So maybe if people had the ability to have a little bit more time next Wednesday, we could try to divide and conquer and come together as a group at that time.
That's a great idea. So maybe move to 90 minutes and have the subcommittees meet for an hour first and then do a recap together.
I think that would be
great. Does that work for folks? Okay. Just by go ahead, Amy.
Was the idea for us to sort of hash some of this out before the next meeting, though? Get some of it done before, or just meet ahead and hash it out and have that prepared?
In my ideal world, I think it'd be great if the subcommittees met separately just to confirm who's working on what.
Yeah.
And then, maybe have a little bit of discussion around timeline. And so when we get together, it's, I don't know, I think that would be a good way to do it. But if the subcommittees want to do it by email, maybe they could also do it that way, or they could have a conference call, or there could be some other way that works for them. Valerie? You're on mute.
I saw Kristen on mute. I don't know if she wanted to add to your email question. I was just gonna ask if-
we just have to be really, really careful about open meeting law. So now we have created subgroups. So one-to-one can email things around or scheduling dates, but this is where it gets really sticky and where open meeting law is really stressful and not helpful all the time, but helpful in certain situations. So just want to be mindful about that related to email as well as conference calls and meetings to make sure that we're abiding by that open meeting law. Thanks, Val.
And that's all I was going to ask was for you to clarify that these separate groups are still covered by that, correct? So even if each group wants to meet before next Wednesday, we still need that 48 hours.
Correct.
Okay.
Kristen and Dan, I wonder, since one of you is on each of the subcommittees, I wonder if we could lean on you a little bit to help figure out the manner in which the group's going to meet and when. And I guess with an eye towards open meeting law compliance, it might be helpful. Erica? You're on mute, Erica.
Right. I'm happy to meet early. I'm just saying it here. If I think it's just the four of us, but I'm happy to meet at any time between now and next week.
Okay. Well, if it sounds okay, that we'll each of the subcommittees will meet and touch base somehow in between now and next week. And then next week we'll plan to, I guess by straw poll, does it so I'm going to give you two options. One is to start the meeting at noon. The other is going to be to end the meeting at 2. And whichever one can work, you can vote for both if you want. So who's more comfortable with starting the meeting a half hour earlier? Okay. Okay, Chris, one, and people can make that work. Okay. Who likes starting a half hour, having it extend a half hour, and so it would end at 2 better?
I can do both.
Okay, looks like the second one is preferred. So why don't we do that for next week? And the first, I guess we'll figure this out, but basically there'll be 2 different invites. Or I guess we can do breakouts, whichever way you guys want to do the Zoom thing best. We can either all sign in, convene the meeting, and then go into 2 breakouts, or we can start the meeting separately.
How would the breakouts work though for someone from the public to join, or the recordings and stuff? I just want to.
Yeah, so we would need 2 separate Zooms. Okay. We can't for open meeting law, unfortunately.
Okay.
Are we able to hold them at the same time if that's the case as well?
Yep. So it's, if the school committee had their budget subcommittee and their operational subcommittee, they could certainly meet at the same time. It would just mean that someone looking to watch the meeting would have to choose which one to watch live and which one to watch in the tape. So it's not ideal, but it's certainly permissible.
Thank you.
Kristen, can you just remind us now that we also have this subgroup, and you said one-to-one correspondence. So isn't there a percentage of our subcommittee that would be a quorum? So for example,
Yep.
Dan and I get together, we don't have to, what is that percentage?
Sure. So it's 50%. So we have one subgroup with 6 people. So that would be no more than 2 people could get together. Actually, no more than 3. The quorum is 4. So it's over 50%. And then I think we have another group of 5. So you'd have 2 people that would could gather or talk or email. Just keep it in the back of your mind throughout the process. And if you have questions, just ask Dan or I. We're happy to help.
Okay, great. So to recap, subcommittees will find a time to get together. And again, it's open meeting law, so you have to pick a time and post it 48 hours ahead of time. Really to kind of flesh out the main action items that we talked about and figure out who's going to work on what and develop some sense of schedule, sort of deadline. And then we will use the first hour of the meeting next week, starting at the same time this one did. And then we'll get together for a half hour at the end to kind of recap where we are. Anything else? And we'll, what are we gonna do? I want to make sure we also send a recap in the next day or so of what the action items we've discussed are, just so when the subcommittees meet, they can start from that list. So I will take ownership of that.
I've got some notes, Tom, I can send you.
Okay, how about this, Valerie? I'll take a first crack and send it to you for your comment. Okay, well, we're at time, a little bit past. Anything else we want to make sure we touch base on today? I feel like we're getting into the work, so I feel like this is good progress. Okay, if there's not, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
The move.
So moved. Second,
All in favor, and we will do the roll call. Erica. I think that was an aye. Dan.
Yes.
Kristen.
Yes.
Shauna.
Yep.
Valerie.
aye.
Jenny.
Aye.
Amy.
I'm not a voting member.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Vibu.
Aye.
And it was jumping around a bit. Did I get everybody?
I
Jenny?
think it's me.
And okay, great. And Jenny, maybe I didn't get you.
Aye.
Okay, perfect. And I'm an aye.
I'm an
Okay,
aye.
okay. I'm gonna get better at this. Okay, thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and thanks for all your help on this. Take care.